You should almost consider this as a companion video to what we did yesterday, because I honestly should have probably done that as a this, or at least this video as to follow that video yesterday. But this, I think, honestly needs its own video, because I think people need to really understand like the consequence of what could happen. Because remember, JD Vance, all about abandoning Ukraine. We've seen Donald Trump saying, well, we're not going to help NATO. We are challenging the fact, or at least saying that, oh, actually, Article 5 only means that we have to maybe give military aid, not necessarily, actually use, military force to sort of come to a country's aid. And the more and more we hear this, the more and more this undermines NATO. NATO is a collective defense agency, and Article 5 is really the thing that lies at its heart. And if that doesn't happen, then we've got some serious thinking to do as Europeans, because no single European nation can really shoulder taking on the defense of the continent by itself. All of us Europeans, and I do include the UK in this when I say that, have to come together and really focus on that. I think if Trump gets in November, especially with Vance, as we said yesterday in his pick, really worrying about what could happen, because you've got a potential scenario that we're about to lay out for you here, something that we've briefly talked about before, but we're going to go over tweets from a guy called Fabian Hoffmann, who is sort of an expert at this type of things from University of Oslo. Yeah, kind of very worrying, but it's something that we should be talking about and thinking about potential solutions to make sure that we don't allow this to happen. So before we do go getting into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. So this is over on Threads. Oh, not Threads, Twitter. Yeah, wrong social media. Anyway, so this is Fabian Hoffmann. Definitely go give him a follow. In fact, I'm not following, am I? There we go, following him now. Yeah, definitely go give him a follow. Really good at talking about this type of stuff. But he did a couple of months ago, or at least 6 months, write a very viral thread about how NATO only has like 2 or 3 years to prepare for Russia challenging Article 5. And as we'll see in a moment, this could come in some various different forms. But now he's written a new thread about why panic should be setting in, especially in the light of JD Vance's becoming Donald Trump's VP pick. So let's get on into this. So starts this. First, a recap. Why 2 to 3 years? So Russia's primary objective in attacking NATO territory would not be to take and hold land, at least initially. Russia would want to challenge Article 5 to destroy NATO as a relevant military political entity, giving it then free rein in the future. This is what I've said before. I've brought up the scenario of what would happen if Russia goes and takes a border town. Not out of permanent conquest or anything, just troops cross the border, just take an occupied border town. Technically, that is justification enough to activate Article 5. The problem would then be, of course, if Trump gets in, do they honor their Article 5 commitments? That is a big problem. At that moment, that is when we as Europeans would have to act. And we would have to act very decisively in that fact. And we'll get into that in a moment. So, but back onto this. So how might Russia actually achieve this? It would initiate small-scale incursions into Eastern Europe, followed by a very rapid escalation in Western European states, now increasing the costs of resistance and coerce them into now seeking a settlement. If Western Europeans falter, NATO is finished. What have I just been saying? If anything like that happens, we have to really come together in this and make sure that if anything like that happens, that we respond as one, and that we've got to we've almost got to assume that if Trump gets in, that it is very, very likely there will be no American assistance. And I think that is something that we have to assume going forward in that regard. And I think even Russia knows that as well. But Fabian continues here. So this scenario doesn't even necessitate rebuilding a massive land army. In the worst case scenario, Russia could amass all the required forces relatively quickly, even while engaging in a land war in Ukraine. So, what can we do to prevent this scenario? So, I have argued that deterring Russia would require both capability and demonstrating resolve. This is where, again, I was saying we as Western Europeans and Europeans as a whole must be prepared to respond should something like that happen. A small scale invasion, Russia crosses into a Eastern European country, NATO nation, takes a border town. How we should respond at that, and we should respond fully in that, and not back down. That is something that we have to do. We have to really show that resolve. Capability, that is all about rebuilding our defense sort of capability, and of course this does mean very, very much so integration on this part. And that means that, yes, we are probably going to have to certainly challenge the EU's sort of hold on its defense contractors. That, otherwise, you are saying that we are going to sign a defense pact and then leave out a European country. That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. If we are going to assume that if Trump wins, and that Europe is going to have to sort of really focus on its own sort of collective defense, that has to include every single European country, and that will mean challenging a lot of the EU norms when it comes to a lot of its stances that it has on some of these things. Because if not, that will undermine the defense of Europe as a whole, and strategically, for Europe, that will not be a good thing. So that will be something that we'll probably see during the discussions about the European Defence Pact that we've seen being talked about recently. So back to this. So we must make it very clear to Russia that not only will we have the means to respond, but we are also absolutely willing to do so, even at great personal cost and risk. I conclude that NATO is not performing well on either front. Our military buildup is now taking far too long. Even worse, the continuous signaling to Russia of immense levels of risk of aversion is pain intolerance. In January, I estimated that NATO had 2 to 3 years to turn things around. So how do things stand now? With Vance picked as VP and considering his previous comments on Ukraine and Europe, along with those with Trump, it is clear that US withdrawal from NATO, whether formal or through political statements, is fully now on the table. Something that we've been talking about for a while, what would happen if Trump would win. While we admittedly cannot, of course, predict the future, things might turn out better than the worst case scenario. Assuming that this is your baseline for your planning is foolish. We must prepare for complete military and political separation from the USA. Anything else is insane. This is why, again, I said this video throughout all this, we have to come together as Europeans, as Europe, and seriously think about our collective defense. That really does matter so much. And when I did my video a couple of days ago, it was really shocking to see people in the chat basically saying we're not going to sign a defense treaty with the UK because spite. And honestly, that's how it's coming across. And I don't think you realize how that is. And maybe you aren't taking the threats from Russia seriously. And maybe you really don't understand that, Europe does need to come together to sort of do and achieve these things. And as I've been saying for months on this sort of subject, that we and Europe are a lot closer aligned on many of the challenges that we are facing, and that we can increasingly work together on a whole range of issues to help achieve these things. This will bring huge changes, I think, to Europe, and of course, eventually, probably bringing the UK back into Europe. or certainly back into the EU. That should be the ultimate goal, and that should be any European's goal who really does believe in the European project. But apparently, whatever, just the madman here speaking out. um, so anyway, he continues. The European states can obviously no longer rely on the ability of the US military assets when planning for a potential Russian attack. This will be devastating because the USA not only offers the most overall capabilities, but also provides critical capabilities of specifics to this scenario. While the resolve is often conceptualized as more of a political factor, it is now directly linked to many military capabilities. Are you more likely to show resolve if you are confident that you can wage an effective war if things go south? We know this. Russia knows this. Losing access to US military capabilities will not only undermine our capacity to defend ourselves, but it will also push the perceived balance of resolve in Russia's favor. Needless to say that this is very dangerous, as this will ultimately now determine whether Putin attacks. In the meantime, we have done very little in Europe to actually convince Russia of our steadfastness if push comes to shove. Key Western European states continue to prioritize their own security above all else in regard to Ukraine, demonstrating risk aversion and pain intolerance. Overall, things have taken a turn for the worse since January. While the Trump administration might not change things previously, given a 2 to 3 year time frame, it significantly now increases the likelihood that Putin will challenge Article 5 in the years ahead. It is paramount that we act, and I want the European decision makers to panic. Not a kind of panic that paralyzes you, but the kind that triggers your fight or flight instinct and you choose to fight. Do not wait until November of 2024. Start acting now. This is why I think the European Defence Pact is fantastic. And bear in mind, I still want Labour to sort of do more on this. I really, really do want them to do more on this. Really, so much more, because we have to really start thinking about the collective defence. If America is not going to be there, if they are not going to sort of come to our aid, then we as Europe are going to be by ourselves and on our own. And losing a lot of those European, the American capabilities, as was mentioned there, is going to hurt a lot. It's going to hurt a lot, and we must think about that. So let's finish this off. So he starts with build up your militaries. We do not need war capable European armies in 2030. We need them yesterday. More importantly, our actions in the coming months and years will determine not only whether the war in Ukraine escalates, but also whether we are next. Act accordingly. So there you have it. You know, you choose, guys. Do you want us to work together in these things, which I've been advocating for months now, but I'm being told that's not possible because people keep on, making a straw man of me. But there you go. Um, even in that video yesterday, people are saying things that I never even said in that video. When Britain is back. And I'm sure people will say it in down below this video as well. But hey, you know, I've said before, time will prove me right. Time will prove me right, very much so in a lot of things. I'm prepared to sort of wait and suffer the slings and arrows. So so as always, let me know what you think down below. I think there is a massive reason really to panic a lot of these, but as this was said there, not panicking in a way that paralyzes us. We must panic in a way that causes us to act. As to quote Winston Churchill, bizarrely, to sort of finish this video off, the best thing you can do in the crisis is the right thing. The worst thing you can do, well, the next best thing you can do in a crisis is the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do in a crisis is nothing. You must act and you must do something, because doing nothing is not an option when you are in a crisis. You have to pick. You have to choose a decision. You have to choose, and that is very much a decision where we are now in a lot of these things, unfortunately. But there are going to be a lot of worse alternatives. Either that, or we have to then suffer a lot of Russian bullying and potentially the complete collapsing of NATO, and what that means for many of the Eastern European countries, and what that could mean for their future as well. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, we'll see you all next time.